All right, it's Jeff at stopthepirates.blogspot.com. I want to talk a little bit today. It's March 12th, 2013, and an article came out on this website, Economic Collapse. And every time I read this shit, it just really pisses me off. And it's something that needs to be exposed immediately. And it's actually worse than what this guy is talking about here, but it's talking about private prisons. And more Americans are behind bars, and it's all for profit because these private prisons are multinational corporations, and they lobby. Anyway, I'm going to get into this article here. It says, how would you describe an industry that wants to put more Americans in prison and keep them there longer so that they can make more money? In America today, approximately 130,000 people are locked up in private prisons that are being run by for-profit companies, and that number is growing very rapidly. Overall, in the United States, is approximately 25% of the entire global prison population, even though it only has 5% of the total global population. The United States has the highest incarceration rate in the entire globe by far, and no nation in the history of the world has ever locked up more of its own citizens than we have. See, that pisses me off when he says we, because it's not we, it's them. The federal government is a private foreign corporation. It's a crown corporation. It's not fucking we, okay? There's no we involved. But anyway, this guy seems to think he's part of the we program, so he's going to say we. And there again, are we really such a cesspool of filth and decay that we need to lock up so many of our own people? Or are there other factors at work? Could part of the problem be that we have allowed companies to lock up men and women in cages for profit? The two largest private prison companies combined to bring in close to $3 billion in revenue in 2010, and the largest private prison companies have spent tens of millions of dollars on lobbying and campaign contributions over the past decade to these criminal lawyers who sit up there and call themselves congressmen, who work for the private foreign corporation, which is really in reality the International Monetary Fund or the United Nations. The country's already been quit-claimed over to them. There is no country. We're living on a giant plantation where they're farming us, okay? And this is prima facie evidence of that. Anyway, the largest prison companies have spent tens of millions lobbying, blah, 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 blah. Putting Americans behind bars is a very big business, and those companies have been given a perverse incentive to push for even more Americans to be locked up. It's a system of that's absolutely teeming with corruption, and it's going to get a lot worse unless someone does something about it. Now, there's a statement of fact right there. It is going to get a lot worse, and that's from my deep research. That's the plan. Is they're going to put more and more people in prison for longer amounts of time. Now, you notice in the 1980s, the prison population skyrocketed with the war on drugs. So we're talking about nonviolent offenders where there really is no there's no victim they're victimless crimes. And it goes on here, one of the keys to success in the private prisons business is to get politicians to vote your way. That is why the big private prison companies spend so much money on lobbying and campaign contributions. The following is an excerpt of a report put out by the Justice Policy Institute entitled Gaming the System, How Political Strategies of Private Prison Companies Promote Ineffective Incarceration Policies. For-profit private prison companies primarily use three strategies to influence policy: lobbying, direct campaign contributions, and building relationship networks and associations. Over the years, these political strategies have allowed private prison companies to promote policies that lead to higher rates of incarceration and thus greater profit margins for the company. In particular, private prison companies have had their influence over or helped to draft model legislation such as 3 strikes and truth in sentencing laws, both of which have driven up the incarceration rates and ultimately created more opportunities for private prison companies to bid on contracts to increase their revenues. Now, did you get that? The 3 strikes you're outlaw was mandated and paid for by the private prisons. Okay? And they're all in on it. The cops are in on it. The bar attorneys are in on it. And the drug companies, the foreign corporation, the CIA, the Crown Corporation called the District of Columbia, they're over there farming in Afghanistan. All of the heroin, the poppies fields. And you look back and you go, well, that's the reason for the Afghanistan war. That's the reason for 9/11. So they could go in there because the Taliban will shut down all the poppy fields. So I had to go back there because that's what they are. They're drug dealers. They ship in the drugs. This is how it works. And if you can't see it, you're fucking blind, because they ship in the drugs through the bling culture, through the rap music, through the hip hop, through all of it. I mean, just look at TV. It's all drinking and it's just, so they ship in the drugs. They take away the jobs. And then they have the cops, the idiot cops, come around and round everybody up, get you in the system, put you on probation, on parole, and get you into the private prison system. It's just a giant money-making operation. And it's getting worse. Anyway, this article goes on and talks about, judges, and the big thing that they're making money on is with the youth. They're putting youth in prisons for just minor things like fighting at school and shit. They'll lock you up for 6 months, and the judges are getting kickbacks from the private prison. And when you're in the prison, then they pimp you out. It says here, at least 37 states have legalized contracting private labor by private corporations that mount their operations inside the state prisons. The list of such companies, so they pimp you out while you're in there for like 17 cents an hour, and then or 50 cents an hour if you're highly skilled labor, and then the private prison, they charge you $5 a minute for a fucking phone call. You believe these fucking criminals? Anyway, 37 states have legalized it, contracting of private prison labor. And such companies as IBM, Boeing, Motorola, Microsoft, AT&T Wireless, Texas Instruments, Dell, Compaq, Honeywell, Hewlett-Packard, Nortel, Lucent Technologies, 3Com, Intel, Northern Telecom, TWA, Nordstrom's, Revlon, Macy's, Pierre Cardin, Target stores, and much, much more. All of these businesses are excited about the economic boom generation by prison labor. Just between 1980 and 1994, profits went up from $392 million to $1.31 billion. Inmates in state penitentiaries generally receive the minimum wage for their work, but not all. In Colorado, they get $2 per hour, well under the minimum. And in privately run prisons, they receive as little as 17 cents per hour for a maximum of 6 hours a day, the equivalent of $20 per month. The highest paying private prison is CCA in Tennessee, where prisoners receive 50 cents per hour for what they call highly skilled positions. And it's my understanding is either you go to work or you get locked down. They put you in, either you go to work or you get in a 23-hour lockdown situation where you get an hour of come out of your cell a day. If anybody's ever been, I've just been to county jail a few times on some misdemeanor stuff, but it's horrible in there. It's horrible. And that's what makes me want to get out of this plantation, man, because it is really getting bad. And that's what the camps are going to be for. And I see it as plain as day with the Obamacare thing, the IRS, all of it. They're going to come knocking on your door, and they're going to lock you up. And if you don't have a job to pay them, they're going to lock you up in one of these prisons. It's coming. I see it. And anyway, so they pimp you out while you're in there, and they got them making, listen to this. Last year, CCA is the big one, Correction Corporation of America. They're listed on I believe the New York Stock Exchange. The nation's largest private prison company received $74 million of taxpayers' money to run immigration detention centers. Their largest facility in Lumpkin, Georgia, receives $200 a night for each of the 2,000 detainees it holds, and rakes in yearly profits between $35 million and $50 million. Prisoners held in the remote facility depend on the prison phones to communicate with their lawyers and loved ones. Exploiting inmates' needs. CCA charges detainees here $5 per minute to make a phone call. Yet the prison only pays inmates who work for the facility $1 a day. At that rate, you would have to work 5 days for just to talk for 1 minute. So this is what stealing the jobs of the general population. This is why, I mean, when I was 18, I had a job paying $9 an hour. And that was, you know, over 25 years ago. And now you get a job and you're getting paid $9 an hour. Except gas is $5 a gallon, and, you know, and listen to what they make. According to Left Business Overseer, the federal prison industry produces 100% of all military helmets, ammunition belts, bulletproof vests, ID tags, shirts, pants, tents, bags, and canteens. Along with war supplies, prison workers supply 98% of the entire market for equipment assembly services, 93% of paints and paintbrushes, 92% of stove assembly, 46% of body armor, 36% of home appliances, 30% of headphones, microphones, speakers, and 21% of office furniture, airplane parts, medical supplies, and much more. Prisoners are even raising CNI dogs for blind people. But here it gets worse. And I'll tell you how it gets worse, because as a U.S. citizen, you're responsible for the national debt. And how do they collect that money for the national debt? You're the beneficiary, you're the trustee over this Cesta K trust that you were set up at your birth, and they have to come to you to get it. So when you violate a code or a statute, they print out an indictment, which is basically a blank check. And if you sign the check, but you go in and you say, I'm not guilty, which means I'm not going to pay, and you don't understand the charges, which means that you're not going to stand under the charge, so you're in dishonor. So they make a default judgment and hold you in the warehouse as surety, and they print out 3 different bonds: a bid bond, a payment bond, a performance bond. And those are default judgment bonds, and those are still sold on the international stock market. That's why, like in World War II, they're always selling war bonds, remember? I mean, I wasn't there, but you see the old movies, they were selling war bonds. Now they don't sell war bonds anymore to finance their foreign wars of aggression. They put us in prison, and they get us to sign the bonds. See? And those bonds are hypothecated, you know, to the moon. And every soldier has a $10 million life insurance policy on them. We have license. We're worth more dead than alive. We're just a huge farm of money making. We're the chattel property of this foreign corporation. It pisses me off. There's things you can do to get out of this shit. Hopefully, you become a secured party creditor and take control of your Cesta K trust and your birth certificate bond. And hopefully, if you do get picked up for something, you're going to be first in line and first in time, so they can't jump over you if you lean up your straw man, basically. So if you put a $100 billion bond against your birth certificate bond, Cesta K V Trust, they can't attach it until that gets paid first. If more and more people do this, we can get out of this bullshit. Anyway, go to stopthepirates.blogspot.com. I know this is running long, but this shit really pisses me off.